People like to believe they fall in love the way rain falls, naturally, quietly, without intention. I used to believe that too. But loneliness reshapes you. It sharpens your eyes, refines your hunger, teaches you to plan the kind of connections other people stumble into accidentally. Before Lila, I was drifting, half employed, half awake, living in a studio that smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. The days blurred, the nights stretched. I first saw her at a downtown bus stop on a Thursday morning. Someone laughing too loudly into her phone. Someone vibrant enough to make the air feel less stale. She had a way of tilting her head when she listened, the kind of habit that reveals a person's entire softness. I didn't approach. I only watched. And watching became routine. I told myself I was curious, nothing more. But curiosity grows legs when you're lonely. Soon I recognized her favorite coat, the mismatched earrings she wore on Fridays, the novel she carried for 3 months without finishing. I learned her schedule just by existing near it. The day I followed her into the Ridgeway bookshop, I almost convinced myself it was coincidence. Nearly. But as she drifted toward the poetry aisle, I felt something settle inside me, a quiet certainty. She picked up a worn, blue-covered anthology. I did too. She smiled, surprised at the shared choice. That smile cracked something in me wide open. "Good taste," she said. I pretended to blush. Guess I'm lucky. I curated everything that followed. The conversation about writers we both loved. The shy introduction. The light joke about destiny. She didn't know I'd spent weeks learning the shape of her life. And for the first time in years, loneliness felt like it had a purpose. Once Lila agreed to meet for coffee, everything accelerated. People think relationships bloom naturally, but a lot of it is choreography, timing, pacing, controlled vulnerability. I knew what to say because I'd listened to her talk to friends, overheard her frustrations about flaky coworkers, inattentive family, past boyfriends who took more than they gave. So I became the opposite. I became everything she'd never had. I let her choose the cafe. I let her talk first. I laughed at the right moments, softened my gaze when she grew nervous, leaned forward when she shared anything that sounded like pain. I wasn't lying, at least not always. I simply highlighted the best parts of myself and muted the others. "You're easy to talk to," she told me one night as we walked to her car. I shrugged, humble and warm. I just listen. But listening is a tool, a mirror, a blueprint. Weeks turned into months. I became her late-night confidant, her emotional safety net. I learned the rhythms of her days, when she was tired, when she needed reassurance, when the world felt too loud. I offered comfort before she asked. She thought that meant I understood her on some deep cosmic level, but all it meant was that I paid attention. She introduced me to her sister, her friends, her quiet, book-cluttered apartment. I fit myself into her spaces like a piece she didn't know was missing. Our lives merged slowly, then suddenly. But something subtle shifted once she felt secure. She became brighter, stronger. She applied for a job she'd been scared of. She started going out more. She talked about boundaries, self-growth, independence. She was becoming someone confident, someone whole. And whole people are harder to mold. I noticed the change in her before she did. The way she double-checked her phone before answering. The delayed replies. The hesitations. Independence looks harmless at first. Small decisions, new routines. But then it starts pulling someone you love out of orbit. Her new job was the first crack. She had coworkers who invited her out after work. She had a boss who praised her. She had purpose. She didn't need my reassurance as much. "Are you okay?" she asked one night when I showed up unannounced outside her building. I forced a shaky breath. "Rough day. I didn't know where else to go." She softened. She always softened. But there was a flicker of something else in her eyes. Concern, maybe. Or realization. I began slipping small worries into the spaces she left open, telling her about stress at work, about my fear of losing everything. Nothing dramatic, just enough to pull her back toward me. But the effect was shrinking. She comforted me, yes, but she didn't collapse into the role like before. "We need to set healthier boundaries," she whispered one night. The words felt like a betrayal. Boundaries were for strangers, not for people who shared their lives. I tried harder, small gestures, thoughtful gifts, surprise visits. But the more I did, the more she recoiled. She wasn't drifting, she was pulling away. "Can we talk?" she asked one evening, her voice trembling. I already knew what she would say. Relationships don't fall apart in a single moment. They decay in slow, invisible ways, like wood rotting behind a fresh coat of paint. And I wasn't going to lose something I'd spent so long constructing. She chose a neutral place, a quiet bench in the park near her apartment. Neutral spaces mean emotional distance. I knew that. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, like she was bracing for impact. "I care about you," she began. Never a good sign. "But I need space, real space." I felt the world compress into a dull, pulsing ache. I leaned forward, lowering my voice, letting it crack in the right places. "Lila, you're my whole world." She looked away, eyes glassy. "That's the problem." She talked about boundaries again, about feeling cornered by my constant closeness. She said she needed time to grow on her own. I gave her every expression of heartbreak I could muster, shaking breath, wet eyes, long silences. In the past, she would have folded. She would have apologized, but she didn't. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm choosing myself this time." She stood up before I could stop her. I followed her to her building, pleading, but she held up a trembling hand. "Please respect this." She walked inside and locked the door behind her. I stayed on the sidewalk for an hour, staring at the window where her lamp glowed faintly through the curtains. People say heartbreak is clean, a single crack. They're wrong. It's jagged. It splinters. It spreads. I went home and paced my apartment until dawn. She thought cutting me off would end what we had. But relationships don't vanish because one person walks away. Not when one person has built the relationship piece by piece, day by day, detail by detail. She thought she was closing a door, but doors aren't the only way in. 3 days passed without a word. Silence can drive a person mad, or it can sharpen them into something terrifyingly focused. My hands shook whenever I thought about her laughing with her friends, sleeping peacefully, believing distance was safety. On the 4th night, I walked past her building, not to confront her, just to understand. The light in her kitchen was on. Her shadow moved back and forth as she cooked. I recognized the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. Even from the street, I could read her habits like a familiar book. She had changed her locks. I expected that. But habits are stronger than fear, and habits leave openings. A window on the fire escape, cracked open for air, just like she always left it. Lila hated stale rooms. She once told me it made her feel trapped. She hadn't thought about that now, or maybe she just forgot. I didn't climb. I didn't touch anything. I only stood there, staring up at the glow spilling from that narrow gap. And in that moment, something inside me settled with cold, unwavering certainty. She thought she'd escaped the version of me she couldn't name. The architect, the planner, the man who watched all the cracks and shadows of her life. She thought leaving meant ending, but endings aren't real. Not when someone knows the rhythms of your life as intimately as their own heartbeat. I stepped back from the building, inhaling the cool night air, letting the quiet settle into me. Love doesn't vanish. It lingers. It waits. And if someone isn't careful, it finds its way back inside through the smallest opening. Love built on control is not love. It is possession. Healthy relationships honor boundaries, independence, and consent. When someone tries to shape another person's life, choices, and identity, it's not devotion, it's manipulation. True love frees. It never traps, watches, or consumes. Some people say the rain in Washington feels alive, like it remembers who you were the day it first soaked you. I've lived in this town for 12 years, long enough to know the weather sometimes knows more about us than we admit. I built a quiet life here after a loud past. Mornings teaching art to restless teenagers, evenings feeding the strays who waited under my porch, weekends painting landscapes no one ever saw. Silence became my shelter, and routine became my way of keeping the past from cracking open. But silence doesn't erase memory, and the past doesn't stay buried, not when someone is determined to unearth it. Her name was Mira Calder. 5 years ago, she was the student who hovered too close to my work, stared too long, and spoke about art like it was a religion. She wasn't a student of mine, just someone who drifted into my community workshops and acted like she belonged there. She'd bring me coffee I didn't ask for, sketch me without permission, talk as if my paintings spoke directly to her blood. I brushed it off as eccentricity, until the night she crossed into something darker. I woke up in my own home, head foggy, body heavy, to find her sitting at the foot of my bed with a half-finished portrait of us sleeping together. She'd drugged my drink. She'd broken in. She whispered, "I kept you safe." The police removed her, and she vanished as if rain dissolved her. I rebuilt my life after that. Locked doors, changed routines, told myself she was gone. Then one gray Tuesday morning, I saw her again, standing outside my classroom window in the same yellow raincoat she wore the night she disappeared, smiling like no time had passed at all. At first, I thought I imagined her, just a ghost dredged up by exhaustion and old fear. But when I stepped into the hallway, she was there, leaning casually against the lockers like we were old friends. Her raincoat dripped onto the floor, and her eyes, the same intense, unreadable eyes, brightened when she saw me. "Ezra," she whispered, as if saying my name was a prayer. "I found clarity. I came back to fix what I broke." I felt the room shrink. "You weren't supposed to come back. I know your class ends at 3:42, she said gently. I didn't want to interrupt. The specificity clawed at something inside me. She shouldn't know that. She shouldn't know anything about my life anymore. But she did. Over the next week, she proved it, quietly, methodically, as if she'd been studying my routines from afar. A fresh lily, rain damp, appeared on my porch. Charcoal sketches of me, left between my mail. A journal slid beneath my door filled with rewritten memories of moments that never happened. Dinners we never shared, confessions I never spoke, affection I never gave. When I confronted her outside the school parking lot, she smiled softly. "We're soulbound, Ezra. You pulled me back with your silence." "That isn't real," I said. "Whatever you think happened between us, it wasn't love." Her expression cracked for the first time, revealing the unstable devotion beneath. "You're wrong. You always cared. You just forgot." The wind picked up, blowing her hair across her face. Then she added, almost lovingly, "I'll remind you." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise she believed in, and that terrified me more. Mira's obsession deepened fast, too fast for me to convince myself it was harmless. The next morning, on my drive to school, I spotted something painted beneath the old railroad bridge. Our initials, intertwined, dripping black against the concrete. A week later, I passed a patch of wet cement near Miller Street. Someone had carved M+E equals home before it dried. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. I tried blocking her number. I tried ignoring the small gifts she left like breadcrumbs, pressed flowers, a scrap of canvas painted with my silhouette. The lullaby my mother used to hum when I was young, scrawled in her looping hand. Each gesture was personal in a way that felt like an intrusion deeper than any lock could protect. One day, as I collected brushes after class, I heard humming outside the door. The melody froze my spine, the lullaby again. I opened the door to find her standing there, hands folded, eyes shining. "How do you know that song?" I asked. "You told me," she said with absolute certainty. "You share things with me when you're half asleep, when you're safe. I never—" "You did." She tilted her head. "You just don't remember." That night, I found my spare key missing from the planter where I hid it. My drawers had been disturbed, subtle but noticeable. She knew too much. She was inside the life I fought to protect. When I finally told her to stop, to leave me alone, she didn't get angry. She just whispered, "You can't shut a door that was never meant to close." Her calmness was more frightening than any rage could have been. The police told me to document everything, every intrusion, every encounter, every unwanted gift. "We can't act without evidence," they said. Evidence. As if trauma needs paperwork. I tried to keep distance, but Mira didn't believe in distance. She believed in inevitability. One cold November evening, her yellow raincoat appeared on my porch, folded neatly beside an envelope. Inside was a single page smeared with blood. Her blood, I suspected, with my name written backward across it. A message designed to unsettle, to lure. And it worked. I should have called the police. I should have walked away. Instead, fear and responsibility twisted together, pushing me to follow the clues she left scattered like a scavenger hunt. Each symbol pointed toward the outskirts of town, toward the abandoned greenhouse near the river where kids whispered about ghosts. The door creaked open with a sound like a dying breath. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and overgrown vines. Mira stood in the center, trembling, clutching a shard of glass. "I didn't know how else to make you listen," she said. "You always leave. I had to make you choose." "Mira," I said, hands raised. "You need help." "I need you," she cried. "If you walk away, I'll disappear again, for good this time." She lifted the shard to her throat. I lunged, not out of love, but desperation. The struggle knocked us off balance, and the rotted floor gave way beneath us. We fell through a collapse of wood and dirt and old roots. Pain shot up my leg. Mira's body hit the ground hard. When paramedics arrived, she clung to consciousness long enough to whisper, "Promise you'll finish our painting." Her voice still echoes in my dreams. People think closure comes neatly wrapped. They imagine a final conversation, a firm goodbye, a moment when everything aligns and the past dissolves. But trauma lingers like dampness, absorbed into the walls, into the bones, into the mind long after the storm has passed. Mira survived. Barely. I visited her once in the hospital, not because she asked, but because I needed to see the truth for myself. She lay still, bandaged, eyes unfocused, murmuring colors under her breath, as if the world was a canvas she couldn't quite finish. When she noticed me, her lips twitched into a fragile smile. "You came back," she whispered. "I came to make sure you're alive," I said. She closed her eyes, satisfied. "That's enough." Her family moved her out of state for long-term care, and I told myself that was the end. That I was safe. That the yellow raincoat would fade into memory like everything else I'd tried to outrun. But some nights, when the town is quiet and the rain taps against my window, I dream of her, standing beneath a street lamp, that same coat glowing faintly. Not threatening, not violent, just waiting. I remind myself it's just a dream, a residue of fear, a mark she left that may never fully wash away. I lock my doors now, not out of paranoia but self-preservation. I change my routines. I talk to professionals. I teach my students boundaries as fiercely as I teach them brush techniques. Yet the rain still feels like it remembers. And sometimes, when I'm half awake, I swear I hear her whisper, "Don't forget our painting." I don't answer. Some warnings are meant to stay unanswered. Love cannot exist where boundaries are violated, and obsession is not devotion. It is harm disguised as affection. When someone crosses the lines that protect your safety, silence is not loyalty, and forgiveness is not obligation. Seek help, speak up, and protect yourself. No relationship, past or present, is worth losing your peace, your autonomy, or your life. I moved to Pahrump, Nevada, with the weight of my old life pressed into my chest. Dead-end jobs, a string of bad decisions, and an ex who thrived on chaos. I was done. I needed quiet, predictability, and somewhere my mistakes wouldn't follow me. The desert was perfect. Flat roads, endless sky, the kind of place where no one cared about the past because everyone was too busy surviving the sun. I found work at a small truck stop diner just off Highway 160. The mornings were slow, coffee machines hissing and the occasional trucker shuffling in for eggs and toast. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and that was enough. I kept my world small: work, my tiny apartment, and the occasional grocery run. Routine was my armor. That's when Rowan walked in. It was one of those afternoons when the sun scorched every surface, and I could see the heat haze rising off the asphalt. He pushed the door open, leaving a trail of dust behind him, and smiled politely, though there was a tension in his eyes. Sunburned shoulders, cracked lips, and a suitcase he said was full of children's stories. "I collect these for people who need comfort," he said softly, placing the suitcase on the counter. "Some stories help when everything else fails." I laughed politely, more out of habit than amusement. Something about him felt safe, like a quiet lighthouse in a storm I hadn't admitted I was still in. He lingered for a bit, chatting about small things, trains, the desert, his favorite books. By the time he left, I realized I had written down his name in my mind, though I barely knew why. There was something in the way he noticed details, my hands shaking slightly as I poured coffee, the crease between my brows when I thought no one was watching. Something about Rowan whispered, "You can trust me." And for the first time in years, I almost did. Rowan didn't just appear at the diner after that first meeting. He started showing up in the evenings, always polite, always just enough to notice me without crowding. He would bring me little things, a coffee when I forgot mine, a mended curtain in my apartment, a handwritten note tucked under my door. At first, it was sweet. I'd never known gentleness like this, never someone who seemed to care without strings. "Thought you might like this," he said one day, pressing a tiny carved wooden bird into my hand. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to say, "Thank you," but I didn't. Not yet. I wanted to see the world without him first, to test the weight of trust. But then the line started blurring. Rowan was always where I was. At the diner, he'd appear at the window just as I stepped outside. He knew my shifts, my favorite coffee, the way I tilted my head when I was worried. He'd insist on walking me home, saying he couldn't sleep knowing I might be followed. "You shouldn't trust anyone else," he murmured one evening as we walked past a nearly empty street. "Not after everything you've been through. I can protect you." I tried telling him I was fine. "I don't need protection," I said, keeping my voice calm. But he would smile, sweet and patient, as if I were a frightened child who didn't yet understand. I laughed when he brought me more trinkets, when he fixed my leaky faucet without asking, because a part of me wanted to believe the safety I felt was real. Yet, there was a tension, a quiet undercurrent I tried to ignore. Sometimes, I'd see his eyes lingering too long, memorizing my movements, as if each step I took belonged to him. I told myself I was imagining it, that the desert had a way of making people feel watched, even when they weren't. And yet, when he left, I felt the emptiness behind him. the absence of warmth and protection all at once, like the desert swallowing a fleeting shadow. It didn't take long for Rowan's care to twist into something darker. He began documenting me. At first, it was small things. A note left under my door about a suspicious car, a reminder that I had been safe that day. But then, I started finding photographs, me sleeping, me eating, even reading in my living room. Each was labeled meticulously, a timestamp and a note, like, "He was watching you today." "You're safe here," he said, standing in the doorway one night, eyes wide. "I just want to make sure. I can't let anyone hurt you." I wanted to believe him. I did. But the tension in the air made my stomach knot. This wasn't protection. It was control. I tried to distance myself. "I think I need space, Rowan," I said one evening at the diner, hoping the words would reach him. He looked crushed, as if I had pulled the desert wind from under him. "You don't understand," he whispered, voice trembling. "They're all out to get you. Only I know. I can save you. You can't do this without me." The knife came a week later. He insisted it was only for protection, but I saw the way his hands trembled as he held it, the way his jaw tightened with a thin smile. "We can leave," he said. "Just you and me, away from everyone who wants to break you." Fear coiled tight in my chest. I realized the gentleness I had trusted was gone. What remained was an obsession, a delusion so deep that even my refusal couldn't stop it. When he finally grabbed me, pulling me into the desert under the fading sun, I fought. Every instinct screamed survival. The dunes swallowed our footprints as the wind whipped sand into my eyes. The desert was cruel, but it was mine now. I ran blindly, heart hammering against my ribs. Rowan chased me, relentless through the dunes, his shadow a ghost clinging to mine. Sand stung my skin, filling my mouth, every grain a reminder that the desert did not forgive hesitation. "Why won't you stay?" he yelled, voice carried by the wind, distorted and desperate. "I'm keeping you safe." I dodged an uneven ridge, collapsed for a second behind a mound of sand, and then pushed forward. My apartment, my friends, my life, everything was behind me. Survival was the only thing ahead. I thought I heard him pause as the storm began, but the sandstorm was a veil. By the time I emerged hours later, exhausted and dehydrated, search teams had found me near a trail. My body ached, my mind reeled, but I was alive. Rowan was gone. Days later, his body was discovered, curled near a dune. The wind had erased the struggle, but not the terror. I remembered his whispered words carried on the desert breeze. Even now, "I kept you safe. Why didn't you stay?" I returned to town, forever marked by the desert silence and the echo of a man's love turned deadly obsession. My apartment was empty, my life quiet, but the memory lingered like a shadow at sunset. I never fully trusted anyone again, but I learned something hard about boundaries, fear, and instinct. Rowan's charm had masked danger until it became undeniable. The desert taught me its own lesson. Beauty and danger often travel together, and the gentlest touch can carry the heaviest weight. I returned to work at the diner eventually, moving through my routines with a careful precision. I smiled at strangers, helped travelers with coffee and directions, but the old openness I had allowed Rowan vanished. And yet, even in fear, I found power. My instincts had saved me. My choices had freed me. No amount of control from another person could strip away the life I fought to keep. I understood now. Safety is a responsibility you must claim for yourself, and love without respect and boundaries can be the deadliest illusion of all. People say every office has a quiet guy, someone who blends into the carpet and hum of fluorescent lights. I've never minded the title. Quiet men live longer, professionally and otherwise. They're underestimated, overlooked, assumed harmless. That works for me. Silence isn't emptiness, it's information gathering. Long before Maria ever knew my name, I knew hers. She was the kind of woman who apologized for taking up space, even when she wasn't. She'd hold the elevator doors open for strangers who never said thank you. She'd type with this delicate rhythm that made her seem like she didn't want to disturb the keyboard. I noticed. I always noticed. Most people at the office drift through their days half aware. They vent about deadlines, inhale microwaved lunches, pretend their lives are bigger than they really are. But Maria, she had this quiet determination, like she was trying to hold herself together with tape no one else could see. The day I found her crying in the employee restroom, she didn't see me. I remained behind the cracked stall door, watching her wipe mascara from her cheeks. I memorized the small, shaky breath she took before whispering, "Get it together." She looked so breakable then. People like her need someone reliable in their orbit, someone observant, someone like me. So I started gently weaving myself into the rhythm of her day. A warm smile, a well-timed compliment, a cup of coffee placed on her desk, exactly how she tried and failed to order it every morning. Not too sweet, light cream, room on top. She thanked me like it was a coincidence. But nothing I do is a coincidence. You learn a lot when you watch people closely. What they carry, what they hide, what pieces of themselves they reveal only to the air when they think no one's around. Maria had tells. She twisted her necklace when she was nervous. She tucked her hair behind her ear when she wanted approval. She apologized when she felt small. So I made myself the person she didn't have to apologize to. When she laughed at something I said, a quiet, startled kind of laugh, it felt like confirmation, like proof that my attention was the right kind, the necessary kind. Then she mentioned her boyfriend. Not in a bragging way. More like she was reminding herself he existed. "He's a good guy," she said once, but her eyes drifted toward her desk, not toward any place where affection should live. I didn't react. I never react. Jealousy is what sloppy men feel when they act before thinking. I prefer strategy. Over the following weeks, I paid attention to details she didn't know she revealed. How often she checked her phone, how her smile tightened after certain notifications, how she flinched at the word weekend like it meant obligation, not rest. Their relationship was strained, cracked at the edges. I didn't cause that. I only observed it. A crack doesn't come from pressure applied once. It forms from long-term stress, from weight someone isn't built to carry alone. One night she stayed late, shoulders slumped, fingers stiff from typing. I offered to walk her to the parking garage. She hesitated, then nodded. "Thanks," she whispered. "You're always so steady." Steady, reliable, safe. The words fit me like a tailored suit. She never saw how carefully I curated that image, how much calculation sat beneath every calm smile. That invisibility was my greatest advantage. People assume manipulation requires force. It doesn't. The most effective persuasion is quiet, unnoticeable, like a slow leak in a foundation. You don't see the damage until the wall caves in. Maria's boyfriend was careless with her. He forgot things. Birthdays, promises, rides home. He treated her like a convenience, not a choice. She didn't complain out loud, but I saw it. The way she shrank a little after every excuse he fed her over the phone. The way she smiled apologetically when she covered for him. So I helped the truth grow. A casual comment here. A sympathetic look there. A well-timed pause when she mentioned him. Not judgment. Just enough doubt in the air for her to breathe it in. But I stayed disciplined. No accusations. No overt meddling. Just presence. One night, after a fight she tried to brush off, she sat at her desk long after everyone left. Her eyes were red, her voice thin. "He said I'm too sensitive," she murmured. I leaned against her cubicle wall, arms folded. Or maybe he's not sensitive enough. Her breath hitched, like she'd never considered that. That was the moment I slipped inside her guard. Quiet, familiar, inevitable. She began coming to me more often. For advice. For comfort. For that steady calm she claimed I radiated. I didn't have to push her away from him. Her own doubts did that. I simply held the space where she felt seen. But the truth is simple. Safety offered by the wrong person is just another kind of trap. I made sure she never realized the difference. It unraveled faster than I expected. Maybe I miscalculated. Maybe she wasn't as breakable as I thought. Or maybe she finally saw the threads I'd been weaving, the way I always knew when she left for lunch, how I appeared beside her at the exact moment she needed reassurance. One morning she avoided eye contact. The next, she kept conversations short. By the end of the week, she was sitting on the opposite side of the break room, like the distance could protect her. Then HR called me in. Maria had filed a complaint. Too attentive, she claimed. Boundary crossing. Uncomfortable interactions. I kept my expression neutral. Hurt, confused. The perfect mix of professional disappointment. HR believed me instantly. Of course they did. I was the guy who held doors open, who baked cookies for the holiday potluck, who remembered birthdays. A complaint against someone like me sounded petty, emotional, irrational. She might be stressed, they said gently. Try giving her space. I nodded, thanked them, left the room with a sympathetic frown. When she saw me later, she realized. No one believed her. Not one person. That moment broke something inside her. She looked at me with fear she tried to hide, and I saw every ounce of it. She finally understood what I was, but understanding doesn't mean escape. She started leaving work earlier, taking different hallways, switching her routine. She thought unpredictability would save her. But patterns aren't just schedules. They're breaths, gestures, glances, and I already knew all of hers. Avoidance isn't a solution. It's a stage. Fear has a rhythm, and Maria fell into it perfectly. The more she tried to distance herself, the more tightly her life wound around itself. She stopped laughing at work, stopped eating lunch, stopped meeting anyone's eyes. People thought she was burning out. I knew better. She was unraveling. One evening, long after the office emptied, she came back inside looking for a file she claimed she left behind. Her hands shook when she rifled through papers. The silence felt heavy, electric. She knew I was there before she even turned around. "Please," she whispered. "Just leave me alone." Her voice cracked. It almost moved me. Almost. "I'm trying to help you," I said softly. "You're scaring me. You weren't scared when you needed me." She backed away, but I didn't step closer. I didn't need to. Fear brings people close all on its own. "You don't understand," she breathed. "You've crossed lines. I cross lines for people I care about," I said. "Everyone else stays outside them." She shook her head quickly. "I'm not yours." A quiet laugh slipped from me. "You don't get to decide that now. You chose me every time you leaned on me. I'm the one who showed up when he didn't. I'm the one who saw you." Her eyes filled with tears, but she held her ground. "This isn't love." "No," I replied, "but it's what I deserve." She ran then, past me, through the stairwell, out into the night. I didn't follow, not tonight. Breaking takes time, and when she finally shatters completely, I'll be there to gather the pieces. Some people don't need rescuing, they need claiming. Before Sierra, I didn't think of myself as the kind of man who could be left. I believed I was steady, the type who stuck around when things got hard, the type people stayed with. Growing up in a quiet suburb in Indiana, my parents were the sort of couple everyone pointed at and said, "That's what lasting love looks like." Maybe that's why I expected permanence, even when the signs of collapse were right there, blinking like hazard lights I refused to acknowledge. Sierra wasn't like anyone I'd dated before. She had this spark, the kind that lights up rooms without trying. We met at a friend's barbecue. I remember the moment she laughed at my stupid joke, the first spark of something I mistook for destiny. She was warmth in human form, sharp-eyed and quick-witted, with a smile that felt earned instead of automatic. For a while, we were good enough for people to comment on how well we fit together. Good enough that I started imagining things like shared leases, Saturday grocery runs, a future. But the problem with people like Sierra is simple. They think they want comfort until comfort becomes routine. Then they crave chaos again, even if they pretend they don't. She ended things in the kitchen, sunlight coming through the blinds in those thin knife blade lines. Her voice was soft, gentler than I deserved. "I care about you," she said, "but I'm not in love with you anymore. I think I haven't been for a while." Soft words cut deeper. They let you feel the blade instead of numbing you first. She moved out 2 weeks later, 2 streets away. Close enough that I could see her porch light from my driveway. Close enough that the ending felt unfinished. Close enough that I couldn't stop watching. After she moved, I tried pretending distance mattered. 2 streets, a 5-minute walk, a 2-minute drive. That's not distance. That's a pause, a breath, a misunderstanding waiting to be corrected. At first I kept to myself. I didn't text her, didn't show up at her door, didn't ask mutual friends how she was doing. I figured she needed time to remember the truth. That comfort isn't boring, it's safe. That routine isn't stagnation, it's stability. That I wasn't the villain her loneliness might have painted me to be. But every evening when her porch light flicked on, a part of me tightened. I'd sit in my truck at the end of the block, engine off, watching the faint glow spill across her walkway. Sometimes I heard her window slide open, the one in her bedroom she used to crack when she said she needed fresh air to think. I knew that sound like my own heartbeat. The first night she had a visitor, it felt like betrayal disguised as laughter. He wasn't anything special. Tallish, forgettable face. The kind of man who buys whatever brand is on sale and calls it a personality. I watched him hand her takeout and kiss her cheek lightly. Too lightly. Politeness masquerading as affection. She didn't replace me. She downgraded. The next morning before she woke up, I left something small on her porch, a flower she once tucked behind her ear on a beach trip when the wind was relentless and she'd laughed into my chest. A reminder, a breadcrumb, a gentle nudge toward memory. People think reminders are manipulative. I think they're merciful. It's easy to forget what mattered when you're scared to admit you miss it. When she opened the door and found the flower, her shoulders tensed. Good. Tension means the story isn't over. I never hid from her. Not once. That's the part people always misunderstand. Predators hide, monsters lurk. But I'm neither. I'm someone who cared enough to stay visible, someone willing to be seen even when it hurt. The night she caught me outside her window, the air smelled like rain and exhaust from distant traffic. She'd opened the blinds halfway, probably thinking she was alone. She froze when she saw me standing near the edge of her yard. "Jacob," she whispered through the glass, voice shaking. "What are you doing here?" I could have given her a dozen truths. Checking on you, making sure you're safe, waiting for you to remember. Instead, I said nothing. Silence speaks better than clumsy explanations. Her eyes widened, fear replacing softness. "This isn't healthy," she said firmly. "You need to leave." Her words didn't sting because they were untrue. They stung because she said them like I was a stranger. "Don't do this," she added. "You're scaring me." I didn't move. "Sierra," I murmured. "Look at me." She did, reluctantly, and for a moment it was like old times. Her gaze locked on mine, breath caught, heart racing. "You made me this way," I said quietly. Not angrily, just honestly. She stepped back like I'd struck her, then slammed the blinds shut. Later that night, I left a book she never finished on her porch. A soft reminder that I knew the details she forgot, the parts of herself she abandoned when she walked away. Fear changes people. It distorts their vision. It makes them rewrite history so they can escape accountability. She wasn't scared of me. She was scared of admitting she never understood what devotion looks like. When Sierra started dating again, I wasn't surprised. People like her can't sit in stillness long. They need noise. Someone to fill the empty spaces with compliments, meaningless gestures, predictable affection. Her new boyfriend checked every box in the safe rebound category. His name was Eric. He had an office job, a half-hearted beard, and the emotional depth of a puddle. I watched them walk into a restaurant one night, her hand in his, her smile forced. Forced because she thought happiness should look a certain way. Forced because she was performing normalcy. Forced because she wasn't healed. I stayed far enough that she wouldn't notice, close enough to read their lips. He talked about work, sports, some show he was watching. She nodded, laughed too loudly, leaned closer than necessary, pretending hurts more than honesty. Afterward, they went for a walk along the river. I followed at a distance, footsteps muffled by the soft dirt path. I watched the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the same way she did with me. Old habits don't vanish. They resurface when people try too hard to start over. When he kissed her goodnight outside her door, she hesitated, barely. But I saw it. Later, I left her a message on her porch, simple black ink on white paper. He doesn't see you. I do. Not a threat, a reminder. A week later, security cameras appeared. One on the porch, one above the garage. The sight made me laugh quietly. Cameras catch criminals. I wasn't breaking in. I wasn't touching her property. I wasn't trespassing. I was just watching. And you can't arrest someone for watching what used to be theirs. Fear changed her routine. I noticed it immediately. She checked her porch twice before stepping outside. She kept her phone clutched in her hand even when carrying groceries. She stopped sitting near the front window in the evenings. Fear rearranged her life with meticulous precision, like she was building an invisible fortress around herself. But fortresses only work when the threat is outside. I was already woven into the foundation. One night I drove past her house and saw her sitting on the couch, knees pulled to her chest. The TV flickered blue against her face. She wasn't crying. She just looked tired. Like someone trying to outrun a shadow that kept appearing no matter which direction she turned. She reminded me of the version of herself I fell in love with. Honest, fragile, unable to hide her emotions. I almost walked up to the door. Almost knocked. Almost said something like, "You don't have to keep pretending you're better off." But I held back. Timing matters. People open up only when the ground beneath them starts to crumble. And hers was cracking more every day. 2 mornings later, she dropped her keys in the driveway. They clattered loudly enough for me to hear from down the street. She looked around fast, scanning shadows, breath sharp. That's when I knew she still felt me, still sensed me, still carried me somewhere in her thoughts. She keeps telling friends she wants me gone, but fear is a language she speaks fluently now, and it calls my name more clearly than her voice ever did. One day, she'll knock on my door instead. One day, she'll want the closure she pretends she doesn't need. One day, she'll understand that stories don't end when someone walks away. They end when I say they do. I hadn't planned to stay in Appalachia, not really. The mountains had always been a cage, and I'd spent my 20s chasing escape routes, cities, jobs, relationships that burned too fast and ended quietly. But death has a way of pulling you home. My last living relative, Aunt May, had been more mother than family, and now she was gone. The cabin was mine, but only in the sense that it carried her scent and the echoes of memories I didn't want to face. The funeral ended before the sun set. I lingered for a moment in the cemetery, watching the mist curl between the stones, thinking of all the people I'd left behind. Everyone had moved on. Everyone but me. I wasn't sad. I was exhausted. The cabin sat a half-mile up the hill, empty and quiet. I wanted to sell it, collect what I could, and vanish again. But that night, as I pushed open the cabin door, the swing on the porch creaked. Someone was there. A woman, barefoot, a lavender dress streaked with mud, eyes closed in some impossible serenity. My chest froze. "Kai," she said, and the voice carried a weight I recognized instantly. My throat tightened. "You came back to me." It was Leora. My first love. The girl I'd left behind when she tipped too far into something dangerous, something intoxicating. She looked the same yet older, sharper, more fragile, like glass polished by years of wind and solitude. I don't understand," I stammered. What are you doing here?" "I came to apologize," she whispered, brushing a hand along the swing's chain, almost reverently. "I've changed. I'm different now. I only want you to know that I never stopped caring." For a moment, I believed her. Loneliness is a hungry companion, and the mountains seemed smaller somehow with her presence. I let her in. I didn't know then that letting someone into your life is never simple, not when love has claws. Leora's presence filled the cabin in ways I couldn't have anticipated. She moved like she belonged, rearranging old furniture, humming under her breath, slipping her hand into mine like we had never been apart. She knew things no one else could have guessed. The exact drawer where Aunt May kept the kitchen knives, the names of my childhood pets, the way I liked my coffee in the mornings. "It's all part of knowing you," she said one afternoon, tracing my forearm lightly. I've always remembered. At first, it felt comforting. I'd spent years in solitude, and here was someone who not only remembered me but seemed to hold the fragmented pieces of my past like treasures. We talked for hours about nothing, about the festivals we attended at 17, the music we loved, the stars we watched from the hill behind the cabin. But slowly, the details that should have been charming became unnerving. She knew when I went to town, which friends I met, and how I liked to keep my nights empty. Sometimes, I would catch her watching me from the doorway, a soft smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Kai," she said one evening as I tried to retreat to my room, "you can't hide. I just want to be close. I'll keep you safe." I forced a laugh, brushing off the discomfort. I wanted to believe her. Loneliness had a way of convincing you that obsession was care, but I also felt the pull of something older, something that warned me to step back. By the end of that week, I realized that the girl I had loved wasn't entirely gone. And what returned wasn't just affection, it was a force that wanted to reshape the world around her. And I was at the center. The first night I noticed the photographs was subtle. I returned from the grocery store, carrying bags in both hands, and there she was, hunched over the table. Faces were being cut from old photographs, my mother, my friends, my first boyfriend, carefully, obsessively. "I'm trimming the past," she said, looking up with that soft smile. "It hurts you. I just want to take the hurt away." I felt my stomach twist. "Leora, this isn't healthy," I said. My voice was firm, but even as I spoke, part of me hesitated, paralyzed by the history we shared. "I'm helping," she murmured, slicing another photograph. "I've learned to love properly now. Let me keep you safe. Let me keep the pain from touching you again." Her devotion was intense, unyielding. She followed me to town, confronted anyone who dared glance at me, whispered threats in a honeyed tone. Each time I tried to push her away, she collapsed into sobbing rages, begging me not to leave, claiming she would rather die than live unloved. I slept little. I watched her move through the cabin, her hands lingering on my belongings, her eyes scanning my life as if memorizing every inch. I wanted to leave, to reclaim solitude, but the mountains outside the cabin seemed infinite, the roads twisting and familiar. She had me cornered in more ways than one. One night, the storm came. Lightning split the sky, rain slicked against the roof. When I returned early from the diner, the cabin was empty, the front door swinging. On the table was a note, smeared with red, her handwriting, frantic, precise, asterisk. "I'm offering you the same devotion you offered me. Find me, asterisk." Panic swallowed me whole. I grabbed a flashlight and ran into the forest, mud sucking at my boots. The mountains had never felt so dangerous, the darkness so alive. And then I saw her, standing at the edge of a cliff, wind whipping her lavender dress,
knife poised against her chest. "Kai," she whispered, voice barely audible over the storm. "Choose, life with me, or death with me." I stepped closer, careful, hands raised. "Leora, step back. You don't have to do this." She tilted her head, hair plastered to her face, eyes wild but luminous. "I can't survive without you," she said, trembling. "I only wanted to be one with you, to take all your pain, all your memories. I can't exist in halves," my heart hammered. "I can't let you hurt yourself," I said, voice cracking. I reached for her, but in her desperate leap forward, the knife grazed my shoulder. Pain flared, sharp and real, but I couldn't pull away. "Kai!" she cried, collapsing against me, shaking with a combination of fear and relief. Mud smeared our clothes, rain ran down our faces, and I realized with clarity, she didn't want to kill me. She wanted to merge, to become inseparable in a way that was terrifying and unsustainable. I called for help, voice breaking over the storm. Emergency teams arrived quickly, and Leora was restrained and taken to a psychiatric facility. I watched her disappear into the night, feeling the hollow ache of someone who loved too fiercely. Months later, letters began arriving, poetry, memories, vows of eternal devotion. I never answered, but I read each one. Sometimes, I stood on the porch swing she had once slept on, whispering her name into the mountains, listening to the wind carry it away. I learned something about love in those months, about its power and its danger. Love can heal, yes, but it can also bind, twist, and consume. Leora's obsession was a warning. Even the most beautiful devotion can be deadly when boundaries are ignored. I returned to the cabin, eventually restoring my routines. I cooked my meals, repaired the walls, and walked through the mountains with the sun on my back. I smiled at people in town, but I kept my distance. I never wanted someone to wield love as a weapon again. Not for me, not for anyone. Still, the letters arrived. I read them, feeling the pull of the past, the gravity of a love that refused to die. I didn't respond. I didn't want to. But some nights, when the wind howled through the trees, I whispered her name, letting it float among the mountains where it belonged. I realized finally that love, no matter how intense, must be tempered with respect, patience, and boundaries. Without them, it becomes possession, not partnership. Some passions cannot coexist with life. They demand either total surrender or destruction. True love respects autonomy, boundaries, and life itself. Obsession masquerading as devotion can destroy the very people it claims to protect. And survival sometimes means letting go, even of what feels eternal. I had spent my life studying attachment disorders, obsessively analyzing patterns in others, while keeping my own connections shallow, neat, and professional. My office in Chicago overlooked the loop, and the city pulsed below like a living experiment in human behavior. I was respected, sharp, and, more importantly, untouchable. Until Julian Vale. I met him at a forensic psychology conference. He was polite, articulate, and magnetic in the way some people just draw you in without trying. He listened, truly listened, as if my words were the only ones that mattered. For the first time in years, I felt visible. We started with debates over case studies, but they became long midnight walks. One night, after a heated discussion about obsessive behaviors, he kissed me. It was electric, the kind of chemistry that made me forget every rule I had about distance and boundaries. Soon after, we were sharing apartments, meals, and nights that blurred between tenderness and desire. And then, the first shadow appeared. Julian flinched at loud noises, became anxious if I left the apartment without telling him, and sometimes stared at me with such intensity it made my chest ache. Once, when I hesitated before leaving, he cried quietly at my door. "You promised you wouldn't leave like the others." I excused it, attributing it to trauma, believing love could heal. I didn't know then that the person I thought I loved was a carefully constructed illusion, a mask hiding obsessions I could never predict. It started subtly. Little inconsistencies in his stories, job titles that never checked out, family details that seemed rehearsed. Julian spoke as though he was being honest, but my mind, trained for patterns and deception, picked up anomalies. One evening, I confronted him. "Julian, who are you really?" I asked, voice steady but tight with anxiety. He went pale. Then, as if the weight of decades pressed on him, he crumbled. I made it all up. My name, my past. I didn't want you to run from me. I couldn't risk showing you the real me. I felt my chest tighten. The man I had trusted, the one I let into my life fully, had fabricated his entire existence to keep me close. My expertise clashed with my heart. I forced a breakup that night, saying words that felt like knives in my own chest. The terror began almost immediately. That same night, my office door was unlocked. On my desk sat a bouquet of lilies, with a note scrawled in handwriting I recognized instantly. "I'll learn to be whatever you need." I hadn't told him where I worked. Someone had followed me. Soon, emails appeared from my account instructing colleagues that I needed extended leave. My key card vanished and reappeared under my pillow. Drawers shifted in my apartment. Mugs moved slightly. Windows unlocked. The lines between professional life and invasion blurred. Julian was everywhere, yet nowhere. My survival instincts overrode my training. I set up traps, small measures, pieces of tape across cabinet cracks, flour near door frames, a hidden camera in the living room. It was methodical, almost clinical, and for a while, I felt a semblance of control. Then I returned one evening to find every trap disrupted. The tape was broken, flour trampled with footprints, and the camera missing. A voice, soft and deliberate, came from the shadows. "You're so brilliant. I love watching you think." Julian stepped from behind my bedroom door, calm, trembling, and impossibly close. His eyes glistened with an emotion I couldn't name: adoration, or madness, or both. I grabbed a lamp. "Stay back!" I screamed, swinging it against him. Glass shattered against his jaw. He fell but smiled, bleeding, whispering, "You hit me? That means you still feel something." I ran. The neighbors called the police as Julian crawled into the hallway, still reaching, still murmuring, "I love you." Officers found detailed sketches of me in his bag, and a notebook titled, "Ways to be Perfect for Her." He was restrained and transported to a psychiatric hospital. But the adoration didn't leave him. It lingered in the space he once occupied, in the memory of his voice. I moved cities soon after, changing my phone number, email addresses, and routine. I rented a modest apartment and immersed myself in work, trying to reclaim the analytical detachment I had once held as a shield. But sometimes, in the quiet of my new place, I would smell cigarette smoke drifting through a cracked window, or feel the faint echo of someone watching me. The experience haunted me, not just for the danger but for the violation of every boundary I had maintained. Julian's obsession wasn't just love, it was possession, manipulation, and meticulous stalking. It had turned my own expertise against me, a cruel mirror of everything I had warned others about. Weeks passed. I slowly rebuilt routines, checking locks, varying schedules, and trusting instincts over appearances. I never answered the letters he sent: poems, confessions, declarations, but I read them, because part of me needed to understand the depth of his obsession. Therapy, long walks, and journals became my tools. I realized that my work could never inoculate me from human vulnerability. The mind is brilliant at predicting patterns, but the heart often blinds us when desire and trust are involved. I resumed my career cautiously, mentoring students in forensic psychology and speaking about obsessive attachment. Now, from the perspective of survival as well as study, I taught them the warning signs, the red flags, the ways obsession manifests before it becomes violence. Some nights, I sit in my apartment, lights dim, sipping coffee, and the memory of Julian's adoration drifts through my mind like smoke. It's a reminder: love without boundaries is dangerous, and obsession can hide behind charm, intellect, and attentiveness. I rebuilt my life carefully, learning that survival requires vigilance, assertiveness, and boundaries that cannot be compromised. Freedom isn't just physical, it's emotional, intellectual, and personal, and no one, no matter how persuasive, deserves to erase those boundaries. True love respects boundaries, autonomy, and honesty. Obsession masquerading as devotion can become dangerous, and survival depends on recognizing red flags, trusting instincts, and protecting both mind and body. I first noticed him in the hospital cafeteria, where I worked long shifts as a nurse. It was late afternoon, and the fluorescent lights made everything feel unreal. Like a scene in a dull dream. He was sitting alone at a corner table, sipping coffee with deliberate slowness, well-dressed, neatly combed hair, polite, too polite for someone who didn't work there. There was a soft smile on his face, the kind that made you think, asterisk, he couldn't possibly hurt anyone, asterisk. The first time he spoke to me, it was casual. "Hi, I hope I'm not interrupting. I just noticed you like your coffee with skim milk and 1 sugar." I laughed nervously, assuming he must have overheard a conversation at the counter. He shrugged politely. "I just happened to notice. That was all. Innocent, I thought." A week later, he was back. This time, he brought a cup to my table. "I passed by," he said again. "Thought you could use a refill." I smiled politely, but a tiny unease prickled at my spine. Why times was times he passing by my table every day. I told myself I was overthinking it. Nurses see strange things all the time. Patients with paranoid delusions, odd relatives, the nightly chaos of the ER. Surely, this was just a man trying to be friendly, but the feeling didn't leave me. He lingered near the cafeteria exit when I left, and I could swear he was watching, memorizing. That night, I dreamt of him standing in my apartment doorway. I woke to the sound of my front door clicking, but nothing was there. I laughed it off. I had a busy shift in the morning. "It's nothing," I whispered to myself. I wished it was. The letters started 3 weeks later. I came home from a 12-hour shift, exhausted, and found a folded envelope on my doormat. My name was written in elegant cursive that immediately set my teeth on edge. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly penned. "I watched you laugh at the cafeteria today. The way you tucked your hair behind your ear, so gentle, so unaware. I want to be the one to hold that moment forever." I froze. My apartment door was locked. No one had entered. I knew, instinctively, it was him. The letters became a rhythm. They arrived daily. He knew things I hadn't told anyone, my childhood town, my favorite cafe down the street, even the scent of my mother's perfume that I always wore. One letter said, asterisk, "I love you more than anyone ever could. I only want to keep you safe, even from yourself." Asterisk. I tried to laugh it off to my friend Mara. "It's kind of romantic, in a creepy, weird way." Mara's eyes narrowed. "Nina, he's stalking you. That's not romantic. That's dangerous." The fear settled in my chest like a stone. I started noticing things. A scarf I swore I left in my drawer missing. My favorite coffee mug moved from the kitchen counter. Every time I glanced out the window at night, I thought I saw him standing across the street, always out of full view, always silent. Then I met someone new, a paramedic named Josh. He was kind, funny, and everything I wanted in someone. But 3 nights later, his tires were slashed, and his apartment door smashed in. The note that arrived at my apartment the next day contained a piece of the broken door tied with a ribbon. It wasn't just letters anymore. He was escalating. I moved 3 towns away, thinking distance would help. A new apartment, new streets, new coffee shops. I changed my routines, locked every door twice, even had new locks installed. I thought I was safe, but it didn't matter. 1 week later, I found my scarf neatly folded on the kitchen counter. My heart stopped. He had found me again. Every instinct screamed at me to call the police. But how do you report a ghost? A man who blends into the world like air, leaving only traces, only whispers, only letters? I started noticing him everywhere. Outside the grocery store, walking past my apartment, sitting in the cafe reading the same newspaper I picked up. I avoided eye contact. I hurried home, checking every corner, every shadow. One night, I returned from work to find my cat trembling on the doorstep. The door had been locked. She hadn't escaped. On the pillow was another letter. "You shouldn't have locked me out. It makes me feel unwelcome in your world." I began to sleep with knives under my pillow and double-checked windows a dozen times. Every creak of my apartment made my blood run cold. I started imagining him breaking in while I slept, whispering in my ear, his soft smile terrifying in the dark. Finally, I confronted him outside a grocery store. He looked at me like I had betrayed him. "You and I were meant to fix each other," he said, voice soft, almost tender. "Stop running. I'm the only one who will love you enough to hurt for you." My body shook. There was no reasoning with him. There was no bargaining, only fear. Weeks later, The police finally had him. He had attacked the wrong woman in an attempt to reach me. I watched from behind the squad car, hands trembling, as they dragged him away screaming my name. Relief should have washed over me. But it didn't. He had been caught, yes. But the terror didn't leave my apartment. I still jumped at the sound of a rustling leaf outside the window, the creak of a floorboard. I found fresh flowers on my porch sometimes, and I couldn't stop thinking, asterisk, is it him, or someone else trying to warn me? Asterisk, counseling helped, friends helped, but every small noise reminded me of him. Every letter, every whisper of wind through the trees, carried the memory of his voice. Soft, tender, terrifying. I started locking windows before leaving for work, sleeping with the lights on, avoiding late-night walks. Slowly, the panic ebbed, replaced by a quiet vigilance. I knew the world hadn't ended, but it had changed. I moved again, farther this time, and slowly tried to rebuild my life. I started dating cautiously, trusting myself to read signs, trusting my gut when something felt off. I refused to let fear dictate every moment, but the memory lingered. Sometimes at night, I swear I hear someone breathing in the corner of my room. Sometimes flowers appear on my porch without a note, a gift without explanation. I've learned to live with the uncertainty, the tension, the knowledge that someone who once knew me so intimately could become a monster in the shadows. The moral? Awareness and boundaries matter. Trust your instincts. Danger often hides behind ordinary faces, and obsession doesn't require a name to be real. Your safety is not negotiable. It is yours to claim and protect. Life continues, but I carry caution now, a lesson learned the hard way. Love can be dangerous, and not every smile is harmless. Never ignore your instincts, and never underestimate how dangerous someone can be when obsession disguises itself as love. Boundaries and self-protection are not just rights, they are survival. I first noticed Aaron during sophomore year, but I didn't pay much attention to him. He was quiet, polite, the type who helped teachers stack chairs after class, and never drew attention. People said he was harmless, the good kid everyone assumed you could trust. I thought he was just another face in the crowded hallways of our high school. It wasn't until junior year that things started to feel off. He always seemed to know where I would be at my locker, in the library. Even walking across the quad, I chalked it up to coincidence at first, but then I started noticing the notebook. He carried it everywhere, thick and leather-bound, and sometimes I caught glimpses of it when he scribbled notes. At first, the notebook seemed innocent homework assignments, reminders, but slowly, I realized it contained pages filled with details about me. My schedule, conversations, habits, even things I had never told anyone. It was like he was cataloging my life in private, obsessively. I tried to tell myself it was harmless, maybe even flattering. He never spoke to me directly, mostly just smiled politely from afar, but the unease in my stomach grew with every day I noticed him watching. I started locking my bedroom door, checking the windows twice, and glancing over my shoulder whenever I walked home. The turning point came when I found the first note slipped under my locker. It wasn't aggressive, just chillingly intimate. Asterisk, I know you better than anyone else ever will. Asterisk, my hands shook. I wanted to laugh it off, to tell myself I was overreacting, but deep down, I knew something was very wrong. It escalated quickly after that. Aaron started inserting himself into my life in ways that seemed coincidental but weren't. He offered to tutor my little brother in math, claiming he wanted to help. He started, coincidentally, hanging out near my friends, asking about my weekend plans, slipping into conversations as if he belonged. One evening, my boyfriend from the soccer team texted me in a panic. His car had been keyed with the word "times mine asterisk." At first, we laughed nervously, blaming some random vandal. But then a message arrived from an unknown number. He doesn't deserve you. Not like I do. My blood ran cold. I confronted Aaron once at school. You need to stop. You're scaring me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He tilted his head, soft smile in place, and shrugged. I'm just looking out for you. You don't understand how much I care. I tried to avoid him, but he found ways to be everywhere. He even convinced my mom he was a good kid who needs guidance. At home, my sense of safety dissolved. Every knock on the door, every shadow in the hall made me flinch. Then came the photographs. I found them taped behind my bedroom mirror, photos of me sleeping, crying, even brushing my hair after a shower. A photo of my bruised knee from a week earlier, though I never told anyone. And one of me lying in bed, eyes closed, with a shadow looming over me. My heart froze. I realized then that he didn't just want to be near me, he wanted to own me. The first break-in happened a week later. I woke to the sound of someone shifting on my floor. At first, I thought it was a dream. Then I saw him, Aaron, sitting there, calm, watching me sleep. My body froze. "You don't understand how deeply we're connected," he whispered. "I know you better than you know yourself. I've taken the time to learn you. That's what love is." I screamed, and he didn't flinch. He cried, begged me not to ruin what we have. My mother called the police immediately. By the time they arrived, Aaron was calm, polite, even charming. He claimed he heard me crying from the street. Without clear evidence of entry, they couldn't hold him. He walked away. We installed cameras, changed locks, and monitored every move. But he was clever, he knew how to avoid them, and he adapted faster than we did. 2 months later, my best friend went missing for 5 hours. She returned, shaken, claiming a boy had questioned her about me. He was always one step ahead. I felt trapped in my own life. I started walking in different directions, taking detours, avoiding any familiar route. Sleep became a battlefield. I flinched at every rustle, every knock, every shadow. My home, my sanctuary, no longer felt safe. Eventually, my mom and I made the hardest decision. Switching schools, a fresh start, a new neighborhood, new routines. I hoped distance would make him go away, and for a while, it seemed like it worked. No messages, no sightings, but the fear never fully left. Sometimes I thought I saw someone in a hoodie watching from across the street. Sometimes I thought I heard the faint click times of a camera shutter when I was alone in my room. My pulse would spike. I would jump at shadows, even in broad daylight. I tried to reclaim my life, making new friends, focusing on school, and pushing away paranoia. Yet, even now, the memory of him lurking, planning, knowing my every move, is hard to shake. Every smile from a quiet boy in class, every polite gesture, carries a shadow of doubt. I started keeping my blinds drawn at night, double-checking locks, and avoiding isolation. Trust became something I had to earn extremely carefully, because once it was broken, it couldn't be given back freely. Sometimes, even as I sleep, I wake up convinced someone is whispering my name. I know it's probably a lingering fear, but the memory of Aaron teaches me vigilance. I've learned to stay aware, to protect myself, and never ignore signs that someone is crossing boundaries. Moving schools gave me safety, but not freedom. I learned to live with caution. I focus on routines, stay aware of my surroundings, and build trust slowly. Therapy helps, and friends support me, but the fear has shaped me into someone hyper-aware, someone who notices the small details others overlook. Yet, life continues. I laugh, I go out, I have friends and hobbies. I try not to let him win by letting fear control me. I've discovered strength I didn't know I had. Resilience, born from terror. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I hear a faint sound, or see a shadow in the corner of my room. I tense, my heart races, and I remind myself, vigilance is protection. Boundaries are necessary. Fear can guide, not control. Aaron never contacted me again, but the lesson remains. Some people mistake obsession for love, and ordinary appearances can hide dangerous intentions. My safety is mine to claim, and no one else's obsession should ever take that away. Trust your instincts, protect your boundaries, and never ignore warning signs. Obsession disguised as affection is not love, it's control, and your life and safety are worth defending.